Good day, learners. Today we are going to study how to find or determine the functions in the different quadrants. We should know the different signs of our functions in the different quadrants. So to remember the signs of our functions, we have this cast, C-A-S-T. What do we mean by this? The A here in the first quadrant means all functions are positive. The S in the second quadrant means that only sign is positive here. The cosine and the tangent, they are negative. In the third quadrant, we have only the tangent as positive function here, while the sine and cosine, they are both negative. In the fourth quadrant, only the cosine is positive here, and the sine and tangent, they are both negative. So by this figure, guys, we can easily remember the sign of this function is positive or negative. Okay, let's have number one. Let's have our diagram here. Here. And then this one is 0, this is always 0, that's the standard position of our angle here. And the 40 degrees is here. Because the acute angle is given, we'll be using that acute angle for determining the related angle which is more than 90 degrees. So the angle 40 degrees can either be subtracted from 180 or can be added to 180 degrees. But the 40 degrees is always subtracted from 360 degrees. So there are only three possible solutions if the angle is acute. We will be always using the acute angle to find the related angle which is more than 90 degrees. So here, in the first quadrant, because our 40 degrees is positive angle, it moves in the counterclockwise direction. Therefore, all functions there, they are all positive. And we have sine here, so the sign of our sine is positive. And by using our calculator plus, so let us find sine 40. So we have sine 40 gives us, okay, I'm going to round out this class up to 3 decimal places, 6, 4, and then we have 3. In our diagram here class, we need to have positive sign of sine. And where is that? So the sign in the second quadrant is also positive. It means that we have this one is 40 degrees. And if you are going to get the sign of, not the 40 anymore, because the sign 40 is in the first quadrant, we need to find this related angle which is not acute, that one. So, let us say that one is angle beta. This one, from here up to there. So, we know this one is 180 degrees. How do you find that angle which is more than 90 degrees? So, we have 180 degrees minus this acute 40 degrees minus 40, so that is 140 degrees. So I can say that another or equivalent functions is equal to sine 40 is sine 140 degrees. And to check that one, use your calculator and find sine 140 degrees, and it will give you the same value which is also positive, and that is 0.643, the same. Now, if you want to find the sign of this function in the third and fourth quadrant, yes, we can do so. So in the third quadrant, we have in the third quadrant, it will be like this. Third quadrant, this is again our 40, and then we are going to get this whole thing here, from here up to here. So this one is 180 degrees. Now we are going to add the 40, not subtract. So we have 180 degrees plus 40 degrees will give us 220 degrees. Okay. So here we have sine 220, but when we get the sine of 220 here, the sign will be negative. So this one will be negative. Sine 220 is negative 0.643. You can check that one here. So if sine 220 is negative, but it must be positive. So what are we going to do? We just put a negative here. So whatever the value of sine 220, which is negative 0.643 times the negative here, will give us also the same thing as positive 0.643. Okay. Let's have number 2. So first, we draw our diagram to locate the 200 degrees. So we have this one, 0 again degrees, the 90 is here, 180 degrees, and 270. Of course, that is 360 degrees. So we locate the 200 here. 200 will be the third quadrant plus. Okay. So from here up to here is 200 degrees. We need to find the acute angle. Here is the acute angle theta. So what is the measure of angle theta? So that is the 200 degrees minus the 180 degrees. We can have the 180 degrees minus 200 degrees because we will have a negative number. So theta here, we need always to find the acute angle. So we have 200 degrees minus the 180 degrees. So we have here our acute angle. Here is 20 degrees. We are going to use the 20 degrees later. So here, our cosine in the third quadrant is what? Is it positive or negative? Now we look here. The cosine is only positive in the first and in the fourth quadrant, but not in the third quadrant. Therefore, our cosine 200 degrees in the third quadrant is negative. That's negative there. So let us find the angle in which the value of that angle cosine is also negative. So here we can have the fourth quadrant because our cosine here is positive. We can have the first quadrant because it will be positive. The only quadrant here that will make our cosine negative is in the second quadrant. So let's have the second quadrant. If that angle is in the second quadrant here, then this one is our 20. Okay, that's the use now of our angle theta, which is 20 degrees. But we're not going to use the cosine 20. We are going to determine its related angle, which is this, in which this one is that one. So this one is our related angle of 20 degrees. And how do you find that one? This angle beta here. What the beta? So angle beta here is equal to, this one is 180 degrees. So 180 minus that 20 degrees here. So it will give us 160 degrees. So this one is 160 degrees. So our cosine 200 degrees is also equal to cosine 160 degrees. So if you are going to find the value of this one, cosine 160 and cosine 200, let's use our calculator here. And cosine 200 which is equal to negative 0.94. So we have 0.94 negative, and what is the value of cosine 160? So cosine 160 degrees is equal to the same thing, 0.94. So another equation for cosine 200 is cosine 160 degrees, and they will have the same negative values of 0.94. Number 3, we have tangent negative 150 degrees. So first, let's have our quadrants here and locate the negative 150 degrees. This is always the standard position of the 0 degrees, and when we have a negative angle, the terminal arm is going to move in a clockwise direction. So we have 0 here, we have negative 90 degrees here, we have negative 180 degrees here. So that negative 150 degrees will be in this quadrant. From here, we have an arrow, meaning that our terminal arm is moving in a clockwise direction, and we have this as 150 degrees. Now that angle is in the third quadrant. Let's put negative here. We must find this acute related angle. And how do we solve for this? So that one is 180 degrees minus that 150. So this one is our angle theta. The related acute angle theta is equal to 180 degrees minus that 150. Just forget the signs. I just computing for the acute angle here, which is 30 degrees. So we can have 30 degrees here, we can have 30 degrees in the fourth quadrant, we can have 30 degrees in the first quadrant, and 30 degrees on the second quadrant. Okay. The tangent here in the third quadrant here is positive. See here. So the third quadrant, our tangent is positive, so we expect that our value of tangent negative 150 is positive. Let's check that one. Negative, tangent negative 150 is point, you see, 0.577. Round it off up to 3 decimal places. So it is positive there. Now, let us find the quadrant in which our tangent is positive. There. Tangent is not positive in the fourth quadrant. It's negative there. So we cannot use the fourth quadrant. And the second quadrant there, only sign is positive. So there's only one quadrant in which our tangent is positive, and that is in the first quadrant. And we're going to use this 50 degrees. So I have tangent in the first quadrant, which is 30 degrees. So what is that one? 30 degrees tangent in the first quadrant. So I have tangent 30 degrees is 0.577, is positive also. Now if you want to use a negative angle, you can do so. If you want to have that one negative, so you can have here, this one is 30 degrees. So from here, if you are going to use the negative, right, from here up to there is 360 minus 30 will give us the same thing as tangent negative 330 degrees. So here we have tangent. Let's check tangent negative 350 will also give us 0.577. So you can choose whether you are going to use the positive 30 tangent 30 degrees or the tangent negative 330 degrees, and that is equivalent to our tangent negative 150 degrees. Okay, number 4, we have negative cosine of negative 240 degrees. So first, let us draw our quadrant here and locate the negative 240. So we have 0 here, negative 90, negative 180 degrees here, negative 270 degrees here. So where is the negative 240? 0, negative 90, negative 180, and our negative 240 is somewhere here. From here, in a clockwise direction, we have an arrow here. This one is our angle 240 degrees. After that one, find the angle theta. This is our angle theta. And find angle theta, the related acute angle. We have the 240 and subtract the 180 degrees. So for theta, we have the 240 minus the 180 degrees. We cannot subtract 240 from 180 degrees. It will be negative. So make it positive. The theta must always be positive. So this one is equal to 0. So we have 60 degrees. 14 carry 1, yeah. Our theta is 60 degrees. Now, what is our cosine in the second quadrant? Forget first the negative here. Cosine in the second quadrant. So the value here of cosine negative 240 will be negative. It will be negative here. And then the negative is here, so it is negative here. So the final sign will be negative times negative. We will have a positive sign. That's one. Locate negative 240. It's in the second quadrant. And then that is cosine in the second quadrant. And in the second quadrant, only sign is positive and cosine is negative. Therefore, the cosine of negative 240 is negative. But we have a negative here. So when we multiply negative and negative, it will give us the positive. So the value of this one is positive. So let us find the cosine 240. So negative here and then cosine and negative 240 will give us 1/2. Okay, 1/2 or 0.5. Okay, 0.5. Let's have positive. So we have only 2 positive here for cosine. Here and here in the fourth quadrant here. So there will be 2 values. Now for this one is 60 degrees. Here. So you can have first one as cosine 60 degrees is also equal to positive 0.5. Or if you want this one in negative angle, then you have this one from here up to there. So it will be 360 degrees minus that 60 degrees. We will have cosine of negative 300 degrees. If you want your degrees in negative. Okay. What about in the fourth quadrant? So in the fourth quadrant here, because that is 60, we'll have our 60 here. So that is equivalent also to cosine of negative 60 degrees. To To check, let us check. Let's have cosine of negative 300, which is 1/2, and the cosine of negative 60, which is also 0.5. If we prefer a positive angle, then our answer will be cosine 60 degrees. This is 0.5, and that is equivalent to this function, number 4. Or if you want a negative angle, then you have cosine of negative 300 or the cosine of negative 60 degrees.